great. That's an awesome question. And for context, I was not an athlete in my youth. So I
Hmm.
feel like I didn't discover triathlon until I was in my 30s. And in high school, I was in band so that I could avoid being in athletics. Like marching band counted for PE, and that was good enough for me. So that was my starting point.
As a PE teacher, I'm insulted.
Sorry, Larry. However, that was my reality.
You're listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, the show that invites you into the lives of people who make up the Ultra family. Here's your host for these conversations, Larry Ryan.
Thanks, MJ. Today's guest is all about finding ways to help one another through community. She has spent her life cycling through patterns of addiction and hitting the reset button. Now she has settled on Kona and finds herself on track and tractors. Today's guest is a farmer, a coach, and an addiction expert due to life experiences. She is a 6-time Ultraman racer, as well as an experienced crew member and race assistant. She has a history of Randonneuring, which includes Paris-Brest-Paris, and the first female finisher in history of the Maui 300K ride. All of this and soon to be published author. Joining me from the big island of Hawaii, it's Ingrid Hillhouse. Welcome.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Larry. That was an amazing introduction. I'm excited to be here today. Thanks for that.
You are welcome, and I'm excited to have you here today. Of course, we've had the opportunity to meet in Penticton at some of the races that you've done there. But really, we got to know each other, I guess, more in 2013 when Lucy was doing the Ultraman World Championships, and we got the crew for her there. Do you have any memories back of doing that race with Lucy?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And, eh, that's the ultimate bonding experience. One of the ultimate bonding experiences with another ultra person is crewing and sharing in that race experience. So yeah, both the memories of the race and what Lucy went through in the race. That year was, the weather was outrageous, as it often is here on the Big Island. So to see her overcome everything that she did, to see her capacity to keep going, her resilience, the strength, the determination, and then to be with you and the crew in the capacity of supporting that and, encouraging and allowing all the emotions and everything to flow through was just, I mean, it was it's what makes these events so special, the Ultraman, but what makes them so special and so different. And the crewing experience, like I said, is one that you don't forget.
Yeah, absolutely. So how are things on the Big Island today? We got a sunny day. We got another rainy day. What do we got?
It's beautiful today. Yeah, we've
Yeah.
been having some interesting weather, a couple of really gray days, which is unusual. And I live right down by sea level in Kona, so it's really mostly sunny down here.
Mm.
So yeah, it's nice to have a lovely clear blue skies, warm temperatures. Just it's great to be back. I was in Texas for a while and I'm back here and it's awesome.
Mm. And when did you move there permanently? How long ago?
I moved in 2016. So it's
2016.
just had my 8-year Konaversary.
Konaversary. Oh, okay. As a resident of Kona now for 8 years, I would like to get your perspective on the Ironman World Championships and how that's gone with going to two locations. They say that one of the reasons for the change is stated that it was the impact on residents with the large number of people that were coming in as the races grew bigger. So I'm wondering, as someone who lives there, is that something that you feel like when they split it up, did that achieve the desired result, or is it still maybe a little too overwhelming for people that aren't involved in triathlon? I guess it's probably your perspective as a person who's involved, and then maybe some of your neighbors that aren't. Tell us a little bit about how you think that went.
Oh yeah, sure. The year before the change, when we actually had two back-to-back races on a Thursday and a Saturday here in Kona with the men and the women all here, was too much. It really, really was too much. And I sensed it from the community, and I sensed it from the race organization, and I sensed it from just being able to deliver the highest quality events to everybody on those 2 days. But really, the community was overwhelmed. I mean, if you think about trying to have 2,500 participants on one day, 2,500 participants on another day, that's 5,000 participants, all their families, all the people. I mean, people were stringing themselves out all the way from Kona to Hawi, looking for places to stay, looking for accommodations. Things were flying off the store shelves. There was kind of a scarcity. I mean, it's like it was chaos. And I think in the community, people fed on that energy a lot of times. So there are the people that will raise the voices and be like, it's so much. And then people kind of jump on the train, and it just kind of feeds that energy. And so I think a little bit of it was kind of above and beyond what we were actually experiencing, but there was definitely a strain, if that makes sense. I think that, the community was raising the voices to be heard. And I think that the message needed to be heard, that it was too much. So then the next year, when we had just the women here for the race, it was actually lovely. And I think that the whole pace and the energy in Kona was different. It was less people, and the sense from the volunteers, from the community, is that there was just a lot more camaraderie. There was a lot less of that kind of super ultra, or not ultra, but just like the high intensity. It seemed like the intensity level was just brought down, and it felt, and all the feedback that I saw, it was really geared to the positive side, which was amazing to see, because often, even in previous years of just normal Ironman, it's always been a little bit more weighed towards the negative side, with the general consensus of the people and Kona, or on the island. I think, it's interesting to have the split between men and women. And I think that the will of the participant to come to the race in Kona, like, I think there's still an opinion around Kona is where the Ironman World Championship is, like it is the World Championship here. So the Nice race and the Kona race and all that, I'm not really going to comment to that, but because I think that there was also really positive feedback on the Nice race and the challenge of the course and the men's race and all that. So it's going to be really interesting. And I'm going to be, really keeping my eye out to get a feel of the pulse of the community on when the men come, and how that feels compared to how the race was last year.
Yeah, I just did a women's roundtable, and they were saying that the energy was very high, and that it felt that camaraderie was, you could feel it. It was palpable. It wasn't that necessarily super competitiveness that you always feel. It was a little bit more of let's boost each other up kind of feeling.
Yeah, let's all do our best. I think is kind of the thing, versus let's all beat each other.
Yeah. What sort of involvement have you had with the race since you've been living there?
I've gone through a range of positions and jobs. I'm grateful for all the opportunities that I've had. So I started before I ever even moved here, I would volunteer and come over from the mainland to work, to volunteer the race. And it was that huge of a thing to me. So a couple of years I came and I volunteered on the pier, working in the transition area. That was always like my greatest love, was to get to see the athletes coming in and help them in the morning, and even to help them set up the bikes and everything before the race and all the pre-race hype, and get to know the athletes and talk to them. So that was a lot of fun. And then when I got here, I was already friends with Cheryl Cobb. And Cheryl was a director of bike and run aid stations, different roles at different times through there. So I jumped on board and started working bike aid stations with her, and became an assistant director. We kind of rolled through races with the World Championship and also Honu, the half Ironman here. And we worked together on those until I think I became a director. We split up some responsibilities. The bike aid stations and the run aid stations were separated, and we came back together. And ultimately I decided it wasn't my happiest, most joyful area of responsibility, and I have moved back to volunteering more kind of just on my own, and have gone back to the the transition area, and also the finish line, which was the other place that I would always volunteer before. So back into those types of volunteer roles.
As we're recording this, you're not too long back from being at Raw this year, the race across the West. Can you tell us what was your involvement there? And for people that may not know, can you also tell us the difference between RAM and Raw?
Sure thing. Yes. Yeah. So I am just back from crewing for Steffi Steinberg and Melanie Bowman, who were a two-women relay team who did Race Across the West, which is about the first 950 miles of Race Across America. So the Race Across America goes from Oceanside, California to now, it used to go to Annapolis, Maryland, but now
it's back to Atlantic City. Yeah.
Yes. And the Raw actually ends in Durango, Colorado. So I've crewed for Steffi also in a 4-person relay with Steffi, Jerry, Achim, and Janos. So it was a 4-person mixed relay team, and they did the whole Race Across America. So it was my second opportunity to crew for her in this capacity. My first as the crew chief. So that was a huge responsibility for me. And we had an amazing crew, and their goal was to break the 2-person female under 50, I believe it's under 50, world record for the distance. And they did it. Nice. And it was amazing. And it was also one of the most intense experiences of my whole crewing experience of my whole life. And I've also crewed for Joan Deichmann, who is Mike Deichmann's wife. That was my first experience, and I'm sorry, guys, if I'm saying their last name wrong. But it was my first experience of crewing for Race Across America and the introduction to that. And she's Canadian, so there's that connection as well. And that was, at that time, it was the most intense thing I'd ever been through in my life. That was 12 days of crewing for a solo person. And with Steffi and Mel did under 48 hours, I'm pretty sure. We'll check the numbers on that. So it was just it was above and beyond what they needed to do to break the world record. But if you can imagine that as crew chief, I was on. Yeah. It felt like the whole time they were on because of that level of responsibility. And so I'm grateful we had myself, 2 others, actually professional triathlete Ginger Powell was on our team. Then local here from Hawaii, Carolyn Craig was on the team, and Jerry Steinberg was on the team, and then Achim Binneman was the other on the team. So I'm grateful we had that many people to support the team at the same time. Because I'm an ultra athlete, I think I was I can stay up for the whole thing, and I can be away, I can do this for the whole thing. And I really pushed through to be, in that role, to be there for them as much as I could, because it was just that important and that intense, and I couldn't sleep anyway. But at the end of the day, it was just to see their commitment to pushing themselves to the limit in pursuit of their goal, of their dream, was like nothing I ever witnessed before. And I've seen a lot of amazing, inspirational performances and people that have overcome a lot of challenges. But what they went through, both of them individually and as a team, was just incredible.
Wow.
And one of the things being that Melanie's bike broke. Her bike completely broke. Oh. She took time out of the race. She had to go get the bike fixed. They went to Prescott. We came up with a plan. Everything kind of magically and divinely went the way it needed to go. Steffi rode for 4 hours straight, covering for her. It's extreme heat conditions, over 100 degrees, going through these. I mean, this was not an unprecedented heat year, but one of the hottest or hotter years out there. So to see what Steffi did, what Melanie did, how the crew came together, how everything was managed, how we covered, how we got through that and recovered from it and then continued. It was just, that was just one of several types of overcoming the challenges that were, again, just, the commitment to never give up and to keep going no matter what, never stop.
Yeah.
that's what made the difference.
And for you, it's coming up with that plan. It's developing it. It's getting everybody to execute and hopefully lead them through that execution of it as well. That's amazing. That would be so much fun. That's the kind of thing that I enjoy. Like, okay, we got a major problem now. How do we?
Yeah.
What would be a normal shift for each one of them as they're doing the relay? How many hours, or how did they decide to divide that up?
They had a couple of strategies. I think going in, we were in the, I want to say we were looking at an hour on, an hour off. And we originally were planning to have only one crew. So we are going to have to get each person in and out of the same car all the time. And logistically, it's a challenge to make that many exchanges. And then we were going to shift to a 3 hours on, 3 hours off at night, because in the race across America, race across the West, you do a direct leapfrog, during the day, leapfrog support during the day. And at night, you have to do direct follow, and you have to keep the athletes in your headlights. Yeah. And so on those exchanges, it requires stopping on those exchanges. So we wanted to minimize those exchanges. Right. And in the end, I think we had to do some on the fly kind of changes in that strategy as the weather dictated, as their own, their need for recovery might have been changing. I mean, basically the heat at the beginning was just really hard to overcome. So maybe that resulted in shorter shifts. And then also with mechanical problems and things like that down the line, we shift and do what needs to be done. So. Yeah. But generally, that was the original plan, the strategy.
Oh, excellent. And how is it that you come to know these people in RAW? You've got a connection to one or two or all of them? What's the Ultra family connection that goes on there?
The connection was Steffi came to Hawaii and did Ultraman Hawaii, I believe in 2016 or 2017. Okay. And I met her when she was here, and I was working in the race organization with Cheryl again, co-assistant race director or assistant to Cheryl were some of the various roles that I had over time. And so seeing Steffi here the year she won it outright again was so impressive that we had that connection. And then because I'm in Hawaii, when she and Jerry would come to Hawaii, we would reconnect if they came for Ironman. But also over time, I started pursuing more ultra cycling. So I was shifting from ultra triathlon to ultra cycling, and I connected with Jerry and Steffi to be my cycling coaches. So for right before I got into my first longer distance stuff, Jerry was coaching me more on preparing for that. But that was also when COVID hit. And so I was like, well, I don't even know if my races are going to happen. So I'm not really going to stick with this coaching thing, but thank you. And let's keep in touch. And then down the line, after they continue to do inspirational things and I continue to get bigger goals. And when it was ready to do PBP, I reached out to Steffi to coach me in doing what would be my longest ride ever for my ultra cycling.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do want to get into some of these cycling events that you've done as well. So maybe this is a good chance to do that. And we will do that right after this quick message. I really enjoy those times when I get emails or meet listeners in person, and they share with me their thoughts about the podcast. With listeners in over 100 countries and over 2,000 cities, I'm not going to be able to meet each of you and sit down for a conversation over a cup of coffee. However, are you familiar with the platform Buy Me a Coffee? Buy Me a Coffee is a super easy way for you, the listener, to show your appreciation for the content I produce and the hours it takes to bring you the podcast as a one-man operation. You can check the bottom of the show notes for a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page if you feel that my content deserves some appreciation. Thanks for being a listener and sharing the podcast with your friends. And now, back to the show. People listening to the podcast, they're always looking for things to add to their bucket list. And you seem to have quite a range of them that you've done now over the years. And I think it started out in San Diego for you, where you started kind of your your randonneuring experience. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the shift to randonneuring definitely that. Well, I guess let me just back up a little bit. I started doing ultra long distance cycling with, as kind of we talked about, that No Country for Old Men. And No
Mm.
Country for Old Men was in Texas. It was a 383 miler. It was the first time I was attempting that distance.
Okay.
And it was a crewed ultra cycling event. So I started like doing the Ultraman with a crew. I was doing ultra cycling with a crew, and that was
Okay.
kind of a natural progression. In that event, I heard about a race called, or not a race, an event called Paris-Brest-Paris
Hmm.
from one of my crew members. And it was solo self-supported riding, 1,200 kilometers through day and night, all by yourself. And that sounded like, oh, that's not for me for sure. Like I like riding behind the headlights of a car and
Yeah.
being safe at night and having, support and not have to carry all my stuff and having people to talk to in my headset and this works for me right now. That PvP thing, I don't think that solo self-supported is probably not for me. And then fast fast forward to my relationship with Steffi and Jerry,
Yeah.
and they were hosting training camps in Lanzarote. So I went to Lanzarote. I love Lanzarote. I raced there in 2015, and so when they had a training camp there, I was like, yeah, I want to go. I want to go back. So I went there and I met Franz. Franz was an amazing German cyclist who was telling these romantic and beautiful stories about Paris-Brest-Paris and riding through the French countryside when the villages were lit with lanterns at night and the local people would come out with coffee and baguettes. And it was like just his stories and his love and the way that I could see how much he enjoyed and appreciated it. And by now, my passion for cycling had grown into a way that it wasn't just about the miles anymore. It was really
Mm.
about my place of like comfort and reflection and it was evolving. That really like it planted the seed in my heart that I wanted to do it someday.
Mm.
And so kind of like got more curious about this solo self-supported riding. And then that's how I got into the San Diego thing, because when I decided I wanted to do PBP, I learned it only happens every 4 years,
Mm.
and it was coming up, and it was the first time that since COVID that it was going to be held, and that if I wanted to get a spot, I would need to probably pre-qualify for
Hmm.
an early registration because they do registrations kind of by seniority. So whoever has ridden the longest prior to the sign up opening gets first dibs at the slots.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so if you've ridden a 1200K, registration opens first. And if you've ridden only a 600K, registration opens second. If you've
Yeah.
ridden only a 400K and so on, all the way down to 200K. So I didn't think I was going to be able to get trained up to do a 1200K, but I was like, but I think I could probably do a 600K before the last date of pre-qualification so I can for sure get a slot for that. Because when I decide to do things, I just like go all out. That's
Right.
part of my history. So yeah, so the last chance qualifier for PBP by the time I decided I wanted to do it was the San Diego Thrice Loop 600K Procrastinators Edition Randonneuring ride, which was a solo self-supported ride. And it was like the first thing I needed to do was get a proper bike for this randonneuring. So, it really everything just started fast once I decided to do it.
Yeah.
And then it was a huge learning curve.
And so when you go over to San Diego, you jump in and you're ready to go there. How does that first experience go of the self-supported ride for you?
That's funny you say you jump in and you're ready to go. Well, let me back up a little bit. I really didn't have any idea what I was in for. And I think I enjoy those types of challenges. So I had trusted the training, but I had never ridden, let's see, a 600K. I don't even know how many miles that is, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And I hadn't ridden more than maybe 7 or 8 hours at one time in a training session going into it. But I had huge trust in Steffi's program for me. And that was also a huge learning that I've developed over the years, because before, and we could talk about that later, it used to be I overdid everything before I would do the event. So I would have the
Right.
mental belief in myself that I could do it. But regardless, at this time I was like, I think I'm pretty sure I can do this, but you never know when I show up and whatever. And the thing with solo self-supported riding is like I said, I had to get a bike, and then I had to get gear bags, and then I needed to get lights, and then I needed a charging system, and I needed a navigation system. Because previously everybody had been navigating for me and there were signs and, these crewed events is different. But when you're solo self-supported, you're on your own. And the San Diego event was 3 different loops. So it
Oh,
was
wow.
3 200K loops, but none of them were the same. So there was a ton of navigation. And we were going in and out of Encinitas and a couple of times navigating through downtown San Diego, like going by
wow.
SeaWorld and the airport and all those places and going through literally like 20 stoplights through downtown. Go stop, go stop, go stop, go stop.
Yeah.
So navigation was a huge thing. Manman Reba, who we know from the ultra world, is in San Diego.
Yeah.
He
works at that airport, doesn't he?
Well, sometimes I think on different projects.
Yeah.
But yeah, with the navigation system, with my Garmin, with helping me get set up, with learning how to load GPX files, with learning how to do turn by turn and all of that. He opened his home. He shared gear and equipment with me. Just amazing human who we know and love from the Ultraman and Ohana. And that meant so much to me to have that, local, that connection. And then to someone who knew his stuff so well that could help me through it. It's like, oh, Mama, the course changed again. Now I gotta reload my that. And he's like, it's okay. We got this. So by the night before, when the course changed again, I was able to load it all by myself. So it's things like that that I didn't really have any experience with, that were kind of down to the wire, new and different, that really didn't even have anything to do with the execution of the bicycling, the actual physical part. It was just all the other things that come along with solo self-supported cycling. And at that time, I didn't have my new wheel set, which my new wheel set had a hub that keeps the headlight going all the time. So the generating hub for my headlight. So I was really worried about charging and batteries and having enough light through the night, being by myself. These events are not big. And so we're talking about maybe 15 people start, and then maybe in this one, maybe like 3 people finish. But
wow.
I didn't know all that either at the time. But I figured I needed to know how to be completely self-sufficient on my own in the dark in these things.
Listening to Ingrid talk in this segment reminds me that many of the guests I have on the show share a common trait. And that is, just because someone is taking on some even bigger challenge doesn't mean that they are fully prepared or have all the training. More often than not, they just jump in and commit. Learn on the fly, tap the Ohana for help, and then just hang on. If you are a listener that thinks my guests are superhumans and that you could never do these things, I suggest that you change that mindset and sign up for that event that you have been thinking of. When we jump back into the conversation, Ingrid shares a few ups and downs of the San Diego event and how they are just learning opportunities when the outcome does not have to be an official finish. You get out there, you're doing the event. How's it unfold for you?
Well, it started great because I went in with the uncertainty of, am I going to be strong enough? Am I going to be fast enough? Am I going to be able to keep up with the people? This isn't my terrain. But I went before. I did some course previewing. I did a little bit of like where I thought maybe the sketchy parts of the navigation were. The first 200K went really well, got into a groove. I'm talking to people. It's fun. I'm like, oh, that's what Randonneuring is about, because it is like this audacious long distance cycling is kind of what Randonneuring is about. And the camaraderie within the community is also an important kind of differentiator of Randonneuring versus racing, because it's not about your time at the end of the day. We do have time limits, but regardless of where you finish in time, the finishing order is by your last name. So it doesn't really matter if you finish like a 60-hour in Brevet and 50 hours or 60 hours. It's going to be like, John Adams is ahead of Ingrid Hillhouse is ahead of the next person, so I was so happy, and I kind of like got into a kind of a small group. So like 3 or 4 of us. So we kind of broke off and we were same pace and chit chatting and get to know each other. And we finished the first loop. And then by the second loop, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. So the second loop, it's like me and Larry. I'm friends with Larry. And we were riding, and it was just great. And I was so thankful to have somebody to cruise along with, with help at the night time. I also had some mechanicals. So the first major mechanical I had was a spoke broke, and I figured I didn't know what to do, and he pulled off with me, and on my own I might have thought, well, my race is over, I can't continue with a broken spoke. But with Larry, he's like, oh, you're small, you're lightweight, you can ride with a broken spoke, no big deal. We'll just like I had zip tie, he had electrical tape. We just kind of secured the broken spoke so it wasn't flapping around anymore, and off we went, like kept going. So that was like a huge, example of how having another person by my side was just like magical. Like, yeah, like I might have doubted, or I probably would have called somebody and asked, but nonetheless, I may not have had the same confidence to keep going.
Right.
So that was that. And then on the way back from Irvine, at some time around 2 o'clock in the morning, I lost Larry. There was navigation, and we were doing turn by turns through Oceanside. So we were by this time, we were getting pretty close back to Encinitas, and I waited, and there were turns on the road that were like the scenic bike route of that area where it had arrows, and it's possible that you might follow those arrows instead of your navigation, just because by this time you're kind of getting delirious because you've gone 30 hours without sleeping or whatever it is. So I waited, and then I was like, I kind of turned back and looked around, and I'm thinking, well, I'm hoping he's going to pop out somewhere, but he never did. So that was concerning. And I got back to the park and ride. So each loop started and finished in the same area. And in that area, I was able to have my car staged with my bottles and nutrition and food and all that. So I took about a 3-hour break and waited for Larry, and he didn't come in. So I thought, well, maybe he got really tired after we got lost and took a nap, and he's somewhere safe, hopefully. I hadn't exchanged phone numbers with him, so I wasn't able to contact him in any way. So that was another huge lesson learned, like in these things, like get some contact information before you go out there. And then I was just about, ready to head out for my last loop when 3 other riders came rolling in. And those were the only other riders I had seen since we had done the whole second loop, Larry and I. And they were like, are you going back out? And I said, yeah. And they're like, oh, we can't go right now. We got to get some sleep. And I was like, well, I feel good. I'm going for it. So off I went. And that was my next lesson learned, was like, I thought I was confident enough and felt good enough that I could do it on my own. And what happened in that third loop was the complete breakdown of everything. So I started getting lost. I started making wrong turns. I lovingly call them bonus miles, but ended up with like about 30 bonus miles of off-course riding. And then I even missed a turn. Like I turned around too early because my Garmin was recalculating. It was an out and back section, and the Garmin was confused, and it told me to turn around. And me and my delirium, but now probably 38 hours without sleep. No, maybe 36. I don't know what it was. But my delirium, I was like, okay, I'll turn around here. It didn't make sense, but I did. And when I got back, I was like, oh, there was a control point on the other side that I needed to go hit before I turned around. The control points are the way that they know where you are in these randonneuring rides. We don't have chips, and you show proof of passage by getting your, like a receipt from a convenience store would be an example of a control point.
Okay.
So at that point, I called the race director, and he's like, well, you missed a control point. So if you want to be an official finisher, you got to go back and get it. Oh. And when I got back, I was just like done, toast, just completely spent, frustrated, not sure how I was going to get through it, knowing what I had ahead of me. But he's like, you have plenty of time. The race director said, you have plenty of time. So trying to get that in my head, again, this head of being in exhaustion, past exhaustion. And I decided I heard Steffi in the back of my head saying, a power nap could be a good thing. And I hadn't taken a power nap yet. So I was like, okay, I think this is the time to do it. And I think I called my mom almost in tears, and I posted it on Facebook, and I was like, just like, when I look back on it, I could see and feel, I still see and feel how I felt in that moment.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so I go to take a power nap, and I sit down next to a tree, and I put my head down in the grass with my hands on my head, and I'm trying to sleep, and I take a few breaths, and it smells awful. And I was like, what? Why? Where am I? And I'm in the pet relief area of an apartment complex, like where they go poop.
Yeah.
That's where I had chosen to take my power nap. And I was like, oh my gosh, seriously, can it get any worse right now? Really? So, but I was too tired. So I just propped myself back up against the tree, put my head back against the tree, and just sat there. I was like, I can't move, I can't do anything. I'm just going to sit here until it gets better. And in that, like, maybe 6 or 7 minutes, I heard the freewheel of bicycles. And when I heard that, I was like, there's hope, there's people. And I open my eyes and I look, and I see what I think I see is 2 bicycles with the Randonneuring. When Randonneurs, like official Randonneurs, sometimes have these big bike box bag things right under their handlebars, which I didn't have that kind, but some of the guys that I started with did. And I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's guys from the right. And I like completely forgot about being tired, just like latched on to the possibility that I could catch them. And I got up and I got back out there, and I was like, just like on point, just I'm going to get these guys. I'm going to find them. I'm going to hang with them, and I'm not going to be alone, and everything's going to be fine. And that's how I came out of it, until I never found them. And it was like, now looking back, I wondered if I hallucinated, because I learned
Oh
at the
wow.
end that there were only 5 of us that even started the third loop. And
Yeah.
the other 2 guys, because when I got to the control station, the lady there said that only like 2 guys had been in front of me. So then I was the third person. There were still 2 guys behind me, but I wouldn't see those guys until later. Like when I was lost again, those 2 guys caught me. So I was like, there's actually nobody. That might have been a hallucination, but whatever it was, it got me moving again.
Yeah.
And then yeah, onward I went until I got lost again. And then Marlon and Carlos found me, and they were some guys, the guys from the who said we need to take some rest. They then caught me, and they got me through to the next point in the race, where that finally was the end for me. But when I met back up with them, it was amazing. Once again, just that not being alone was made such a
Yeah.
difference in the whole energy of where I was, and being able to share the experience with others. And one of them was having some problems, so it was like rally to help them, and just the way that we can overcome our own limits when we're in the space of helping others was really huge.
Mm. And you said that's where it ended for you. Does that mean that you did not finish that race?
I did not finish that race, so I was about I think about, can't remember if it was 12 or 24, might have been only 12 miles out, but maybe 24 miles out from the end, when all 3 were going up this hill together to the monument, where we had a secret control, where we had to answer a question on our card based on the sign that was up there. And I just started falling off from them. And I was like, well, this is weird, because I've been so strong, and I've been doing so well, and I've been keeping up with my nutrition, and I've been keeping up with my hydration, and what's going on? Why am oh, I think it's a flat. So I had a flat tire going up the hill, and a flat is no big deal. I've changed lots of flats. However, this was a
Yeah.
new to me bicycle. Randonneuring was new. I had just got this bike 2 weeks before I left, and I had not practiced changing a flat on it. And
Mm.
Marlon and Carlos were like, you okay? I was like, yeah, I got this. I'll see you on your way back down, whatever. I wasn't that far behind. We weren't that far from the end. But it turns out that there was a few things. It was a through axle, which, okay, no big deal. We can figure that out. It was really tight, and I was really weak, and that's okay. I can power through that. but then I could not get the tire off the rim, which is like rookie mistake. Like, why can't you, sometimes the tires are just tight. And I'm like, I don't think it's my strength. I think there's really something off here. But I couldn't figure it out. So I called a friend. I called my friend Heather Herrick, who has crewed for me, who has also crewed for others in Ultraman Ohana and follows the race. And her husband was a bike mechanic, and they had both had crewed for me before, and he was like, tell her to ride it flat. So I was like, okay, you don't have that much further to go. So I was riding it flat, trying to descend, and then I was just like, this is not a good idea. I don't think this is going to work out for me. And then I was like, okay, well, if you walk to the rest of the way with your bicycle, could you make it in the cutoff? And I started going through all the things on
Right. Yeah, yeah.
when do you stop? When's it just enough? And the sun was setting, and I was starting to get cold, and I don't like being cold at all. But I was also like, you know what? I have done everything I can, and I don't have anything more to prove at this point. Like, I won't make the cutoff. I mean, even if I was riding my fastest at this point, it's not in the cards. And I mean, I've overcome other things, and as far as believing in cutoffs and things like that, but I was like, yeah, I think I'm good. And I learned this was no longer the last chance procrastinators edition race, that the Davis Bike Club in California had added a last chance. Literally, the event was like a day before. Like, I think the event was October 25th, and your last day to qualify was October 26th. And so she snuck one in. Deb Banks at the Davis Bike Club snuck one in. And so I knew that there was one last chance. And there was also, I think, an Arizona ride got sneaked in. So I actually signed up to do the Arizona ride, got COVID before that, and then ended up doing the Davis ride, which was a breeze after everything that I had learned.
After all your learning that you did on the first one.
And this one. Yeah. And that's kind of like, that's a repeating cycle in my stories of how I've evolved as an ultra athlete as well, I think.
Yeah. And that's obviously, again, one of the reasons why I think people will tune into this podcast to listen to you, is because of all the experiences you've had. And it's so much easier to learn from hearing those stories from other people and remembering that when you get to an event, that sometimes it just, that sharing that the people that come on the podcast do, it empowers the other people listening. It's like, okay, they got through that. And if that ever happened to me, now I know how to get through that. And that's just one more step, one more way of, unfortunately, you have to live it for them, but at least we're providing this to them, that they can have that confidence going forward as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And my message on that is that's the growth that comes, like, because I went through it all, then the next one was better. And then the Maui ride was extremely, extremely horrible. And then PBP was like, okay, that was not so bad. I mean, that was actually easier than a lot of the stuff that I went through to get to that point.
Yeah. Well, I do want to hear some about the PBP as well. That's 1,200 kilometers. Tell us, what is that course that you go on, and how much sleeping time are you getting on a randonneuring like that, and how did that particular one go for you? Tell us about it, because I know this is one that people do know about and some thinking of trying to take on.
Yes, thank you. The mystique and the mystery of PBP was what really attracted me to it. So PBP is Paris-Brest-Paris, and it's 1,200K from Paris, but really you start in, can't remember, but near Paris, and then you go all the way to Brest, which is on the western coast of France. So you basically go all the way to the coastline. You see the sea, and then you turn around and you come back. But you don't come back on the exact same course. It's a little bit slightly different course. And you go through the French countryside, and it's, 40,000 plus feet of climbing in the whole thing. But it's pretty rolling. There's really as far as the terrain and the road conditions and the feelings of safety and the traffic or anything like that, it's really a lovely ride compared to a
Mm.
lot of the qualifiers I did getting ready
Yeah.
for it. The first control is, I believe, was about at least 100 miles out. Might have been around 200K. And then there was a control at 400K that you hit at 400K and 800K. And then there was the turnaround was at 600K. These were like big, like aid stations. So
Oh
whereas
yeah.
the control points of the brevets that I did were convenience stores and no one was there and you're on your own. Um, these were oftentimes in cafeterias or places where they would actually have hot food available with
Mm.
choices of foods that I actually would eat, whereas I wasn't really eating from convenience store foods because I'm all big on this no sugar thing, which is another story. But yeah, so there was foods that I could eat. They had water stations, so you could refill your water. You didn't have to buy water like I did on the brevets or carry it all with you. But I did actually have a lot of my own supplies and food and nutrition because I am pretty particular about that stuff. So I staged a pretty substantial drop bag at the 400K, 800K point, knowing that I would stop and have some big refills there. As far as the sleeping goes in Paris-Brest-Paris, well, the time cutoff is 90 hours. So you have 90 hours to do 1200K. And it's up to you where and how you choose to sleep. And the stories that Franz told me were about how he would just, when it was nighttime, after he was riding under the stars, he would just pull over on the side of the road in a patch of grass and have like a ditch nap. Or perhaps a local villager would pull their couch out or a cot or have a pallet set on the side of the road for a weary cyclist to take a break. So I had these like ideas that, well, I guess when it comes time to sleep, I'll just crash out on the side of the road, which I did not end up doing. However, that happens. And it's really crazy to see people laid out like corpses. Literally, people will lay out arms and legs sprawled, um, just completely knocked out, crashed out because they've been going so long and you get that tired and you just crash out. So my experience was I waited until I got to a control station and found like a wood deck at the control station and I kind of set up my little stuff that I brought with me and warm clothes and things and tried to take a nap, but there was a motion sensing light that kept coming on, so that didn't work well for me. That was about an hour of an attempt to nap. So I rolled through that one. And then when I got to the turnaround point, that was set up at a dorm. Like there was a college campus, and so they had a dorm, and they were offering for €5, which is about $5, you could go in and take a rest. So I had found another woman, which there weren't that many women in this event. Now, should let everybody know there's like 6,500 people. So there's also no problem with ever being alone or getting lost on this thing. So navigation is not a problem. But only about 475 women started and 317 women finished. So it was definitely the demographics and the cycling communities and whatever was there weren't that many women out there. But I found a lady that I was riding with. We rolled into the turnaround together and paid our €5 each and shared a dorm room and crashed out. And it was pretty cool. You ask the monitor to wake you up in an hour. And they do. They come into the room and they tap, tap, tap. It's time to get up. So I wake up, I'm refreshed, I'm ready to go. And I look at my cycling buddy and I was like, okay, ready to go. And she's like, no, you snored the whole time. I'm like, God, I'm taking another hour. So I felt really bad for that. And she finished in the end also. So that was wonderful. I would see her later, but that was kind of a unique experience
Oh yeah.
when you're that
That's
tired.
great.
And then also at the 400K, 800K point, my mom had come from the mainland and was in Paris, so she staged herself there. And when I came
Oh
around at
nice.
800K, I was able to find a safe place to sleep with her. So yeah, so I had 3 hours of sleep there. So all total, I got about 4 hours of actual sleep during the 82 hours that I was out there, and then had other periods of time where I was, eating and like refilling my bottles and doing the controls. I mean, every time you got to a control, there's kind of a lot of people there. So you have to park your bike and you go through the station, and it's like they're stamping passports. It's pretty cool. The
Yeah.
staff that they have, and the communities are as amazing as the stories that I heard, as far as the love of the cyclists, the interest, the support, the cheers. I mean, it's just the culture of cycling is so different in Europe, and it felt really good.
Yeah.
It felt really good there. It didn't I always feel so good on the course with my other cyclists. Like, that was what in the end was really unsatisfying and unfulfilling to me. Was I felt really I felt a lot more competition and negative energy at the end
Oh,
than I really had hoped for. Than my
right.
experiences in the brevets had been. Like, I felt like I made some good friends out there, and I really didn't feel that at the end of this one.
Is it just because this one's too big, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think that's it.
Culture?
I think culture. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned about you reading through your pre-interview stuff is that a lot of the times you're willing to try and take on your weaknesses and focus on getting a little bit stronger. Like, we've talked a lot about your cycling, and obviously that's something that you're very comfortable with. But there was a time where you wanted to work on your swim, the time you wanted to work on your run a bit more. So you took on a couple of races to do that. Can you tell us about why it is you think that you're able to be unlike a lot of successful athletes and check on the weakness and go for it? And then what were the events that you did, and how did those ones come out for you?
I think it was probably about the time that I decided I definitely wanted to do the Ultraman, which was after I did my first Ironman. I did my first Ironman in 2009. And after my first Ironman, I was like, I want to do the Ultraman. And so I'm going to have to swim in like the ocean, and it's going to be big and scary. And what's the like scariest swim I could think of right now that I know of? Alcatraz. So I
Mm,
decided to do the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon so that I could really um, get over that fear of swimming in a scary, cold, dark ocean full of sharks.
yeah.
That's
And
one example. And similarly, when I decided to do Ultraman, I knew I was going to have to run 52.4 miles. I wasn't a runner. I've never done anything longer than Ironman distance. And I was
oh
like,
yeah,
well, if I'm going to have to run 52.4 miles at the end of swimming 10K and biking 270 something miles, then maybe I should just run 100 miles, just in a 100-mile run, and make sure that I can do this 52-mile run in the Ultraman. And so
right.
that's why I went after the Rocky Raccoon. And
Well,
I did that. I think also these were like in 2010, 11. I did my first Ultraman in 2011.
mm, and that was Ultraman Canada.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into your Ultraman experience then, because you did come up when Steve Brown had Ultraman Canada, and he converted to 520K Canada. So you did the race with him 3 times. Is that correct?
Yes. I
Yeah.
loved
And
that
then
race.
all,
I mean, that, like, why would I go back 3 times? But oh my gosh, the first experience was so amazing, so incredible. I'd never been to a place like Penticton, the beauty, the course,
mm,
the whole idea of Ultraman, Aloha, Ohana, Kopua, it felt so good. And
mm,
I was like, I want more of this. So I did it in 2011. And then that qualified me for Ultraman Hawaii in 2012. But I decided, but I need to do it. I need to do Canada again. So I did,
mm,
my second and third Ultramans were back to back Canada and Hawaii in 2012.
right. Yeah.
And then I came back in
And
2015, and that's when I did the Ultra 520 when it was rebranded that way. And because again,
right.
it was a time in my racing that I needed to come back. Like, I needed that for my healing through other problems that I was going through in life.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ultra Tri-Fest Canada, where you can race the traditional 515, a 515 relay, or a 515 non-stop. There's also a 360K format, which does not require a crew. And because we are hosting you in Whistler, there is also an ultra gravel race. And if you've always wanted to go to a 515 World Championship, check out the information on the website about our new Worldwide Championships, which is available to every 515 racer of all time. We are now asking athletes to express their interest in attending the 2025 events. Email us at ultratrifestcanada@gmail.com to express your interest in joining us in 2025. This will help us to determine a viable field for each of the events, and you will not have to pay an entry fee until it is confirmed. Again, get the information from ultratrifestcanada.com, proud sponsor of 515, the Ultra Podcast. Up to this point, Ingrid has shared some of her race experiences and how she's connected to different communities throughout her journey and what that's meant to her. In this next segment, she tells us about what was driving her for so many years, not only in her athletic endeavors, but also in the other parts of her life. She's about to get into how addiction issues can cycle back in different forms and how she came to recognize this in herself. Not unlike many people who find their way into ultra sports, you had a bit of an addiction issue as a younger woman and found that ultra was a more positive way to channel your addictive tendencies, should we say. And you've touched on this a little bit throughout our conversation already, but I do want to hear more about this from you. Can you tell us about your years prior to triathlon, like what your life was like? And I understand that at that time you were more of a workaholic and a people pleaser, that you were using alcohol and maybe other things to numb out your self-criticism. What was going on? You were working as a petroleum engineer, I believe. Sounds like a good Texas job.
Right.
Yeah. Tell me about what was going on in your life and how that's kind of led you in the triathlon and to where you are now, where you got the handle on it, and give us the background, please.
Sure. Yeah, I think sometimes I start with like everything in moderation. Just a little won't hurt you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that doesn't work for me in my life. But actually it does. And so that's the interesting thing. I think that, in everything that I have, not everything, but in many things that I've gone after in my life, but even before triathlon, I go all out. And that's something that is just part of who I am. But at the same time, it can propel me to like great accomplishment and achievement. It can also threaten to derail my whole life. And so that's kind of these cycles that I've repeated in my life. So whenever I was in high school, I was really, really smart and loved math and science. And I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to college, but my uncle was an engineer. So I decided I would be an engineer. And I got a scholarship to study petroleum engineering. I had no idea what it was. And was like, well, I didn't really know what engineering was, really, for that matter. It was like, oh, well, engineers are like scientists that solve problems. What does that mean? But
I thought they were the people that drove the trains.
Exactly. But I went with it, and I was like, well, all the engineerings are kind of the same for the first 2 years, so I could just ride the scholarship, and if it doesn't work out, I can change my major and be the chemical engineer that I wanted to be. That's kind of what I thought. I loved chemistry at the time. But really, it turned out whenever I took my first petroleum engineering class, it was pretty fascinating. And I really got interested in what was fascinating about it was drilling wells and the actual kind of the tangible description of what was going on as the drill bit was going in the ground and it's churning up rocks and we're using mud to control the forces. Like everything that I was trying to learn conceptually in other engineering was very like tangible, and it made a lot of sense to me. Then I could visualize what was going on really well. And I was like, okay, I think this petroleum engineering might be something I'll stick with. And in college, I got an internship, and I went to work for Texaco, and I really enjoyed it. I got put out in the field right away, so I was working in the oil fields of West Texas with the guys that are producing wells out there. Like on in Texas, you got the pump jacks that go up and down that are pulling the
Yeah.
oil out of the ground. So I was out there in that environment as a 20-year-old young woman in West Texas. And I actually had a wonderful experience, which is not what I don't think anyone was expecting for me, because I had a lot of people fearing that is that a safe place for you? And
Mm.
what's it, all the just like a lot of like stereotypes about that environment just did not turn
Yeah.
out to be like that for me. And I think part of it was I'm a really hard worker, and I went out there open to learning and working hard. And the people I connected with, the guys that I was working with, saw that more as, wow, look at this amazing opportunity this young woman has. And wouldn't it be cool if my daughter, my niece, my granddaughter had an opportunity like this? And they embraced me more in that like kind of nurturing way. And
Hmm.
I think because I had such a good solid foundation, then my career was just like I just threw myself into my career. And that's part of my nature, right? So then I'm like working as hard as I can to always get the next rung on the ladder of moving up in a major oil company, and maybe had visions of being the president of Texaco someday, like just dreams of what's possible for me, big dreams. um and I think that works for a while, and then things when I was always trying to fuel my life from validation of others and seeking others, like getting to that next rung, it wasn't as much for me as it was so I could be like, look and see, I'm smart, and getting to the next rung, and look and see, I now I took the classes that I needed to do and the test I need to do, and now I'm a professional engineer. I got a stamp. Isn't that awesome? Like that gives me
Hmm.
value. Look at me. And I think through my whole career, there was the fuel behind what I was doing was always looking for approval, validation, worth. I just
Hmm.
wanted to be valued and appreciated. And I just kept thinking that the more that I threw myself into the work, that I would get that someday. And so I worked really hard for a really long
Hmm.
time, and to the point of burnout in the end. And what happened in the end was I finally learned that no matter how hard I worked, I was never going to get the love, validation, and approval of the people around me. That's not how it worked. And unfortunately, it was because I felt like um, it was the biggest deal of my life. And I was on a team of people, and there was a celebration at the end, and I wasn't invited to the celebration because I don't
Mm.
drink. That no matter how hard I worked, I would never like I would never be one of the guys at the end of the day
Right.
was the message. And it's not that I wanted to be one of the guys. I just wanted to be valued and appreciated. And that was like the wake up call for me that you're going to work yourself to death for this, or are you going to make a change in your life? And that's when I decided I need to make a change in my life. And that's when I sold everything and moved to Hawaii, because I thought, well, by moving to Hawaii and getting out of this stressful situation, then it's all up to me, and can find other things that are satisfying and fulfilling. And I threw myself into volunteer activities and starting a women's group and trying to be a health coach and all the things. Um, but I never figured out how to like fill that void of wanting the validation of others to like fill this hole inside of me. And what I was using instead was exercise and sugar. So I had been doing that with my work to self-soothe, to numb out, to de-stress. And then I was doing it also in Hawaii. And I didn't realize it until another breaking point. I was like, here I am again, overweight. I need to sign up for a race to make myself be healthy. And I'm unhappy. There's a hole inside of me and I'm trying to stuff it with something. And I keep doing the same thing over and over and I can't take it anymore. And what's wrong with me? And that's when I Googled sugar addiction because that's where sugar had become such a problem in my life, that I wasn't using alcohol. And um, I found that I felt better when I ate sugar. And what I learned was that for some people, sugar can be a very addictive drug because of our brain's need for a dopamine hit. And the way that my brain
Hmm.
responds to sugar is like that of an addict. And when I have a little, that dopamine set point gradually works its way higher and higher to where a little doesn't do it
Right.
for me anymore. And I think, now that I've learned more in this recovery process, that's been my problem all along. Even with the ultra sports, it's a little doesn't do it anymore. I need more.
Yeah.
A little doesn't do it anymore. I need more. And in the space of the recovery from sugar addiction is where I've just learned that I have to get off all the substances and find what's missing from inside me that's not going to come from anywhere else. And no food or substance or exercise or anything is going to replace or, going to fill the void. It has to come from within. And that's
Hmm.
kind of the message that I'm trying to share.
Was there also an alcohol problem before that's why you stopped alcohol?
When I was in college, I was drinking so much that I almost failed out of school. So I
Mm.
went from being a super intelligent, smart, having it all together high school kid to overconfident, possibly college student. And I was
Mm.
in a place that I didn't want to be. I didn't actually want to go to Texas A&M. I wanted to be at University of Texas with all my friends, but I got the scholarship to go to A&M, so I had to go there.
Mm.
Was what I was told. Financially, it was the best decision, and I was gonna study petroleum engineering. And I think that, the rebellious part of me was like, oh, not accepting of that. And I was overconfident. I was like, I'm smart. I don't need to go to class. So I was started drinking and partying more and going back to Austin, cutting class. So by the time I was a junior in college, or maybe my sophomore year, I was literally on the verge of dropping out. I was on scholastic probation, and the scholarship was taken away. So at this point, that didn't even matter anymore. And but I still kept drinking. I mean, I pulled myself out of it, out of the scholastic probation, because I found a community of petroleum engineers who I started studying with. So that's also kind of a theme that I have, is when you find a community of support, life is better. When you share these challenges with other people, life is better. When you lift each other up, life is better. But I made it through college and onward into my career, and it's baffling how I could be so successful externally and internally be such a mess. And so just um, functioning to do what I needed to do to get that approval that I was seeking at the time, but at the same time numbing so hard that that it was to the point of blacking out and oblivion, to the point that on the weekends, after a weekend bender, when I would try to get ready for work on Monday morning, my hands would be shaking when I would be trying to put on my makeup from the withdrawals from the alcohol that I had been drinking over the weekend. So it was a
Mm.
big, big problem. And I had, I guess what the turning point for me was, it was a Memorial or Labor Day weekend, holiday weekend, where I was out drinking the whole like 3 days and in a blackout state, was driving. And I woke up the next morning and had no memory of what happened, but then started getting flashes of pictures in my brain of what I thought happened. And I thought maybe there was blood, and I thought I hit a curb, and I thought maybe, did I hit something? Did I hit someone? Did I have a hit and run? Like my brain was just like the terror, the fear, the still being in the fog of probably still being drunk from the night before was
Mm.
just horrible. And I ran out to my car to see if there was damage on my car, and my car was there and there was no damage. And I turn on the news to see if there's reports of a hit and run on the local news, because I'm terrified that I've done something, and there's nothing. I don't see anything. There's no sign of blood on my car. There's no sign of damage on my car.
Mm.
And I realize that I'm saved from that horrible nightmare, that nothing happened, that I was home safe. And that was my wake up call, that if I
Mm.
didn't stop drinking, I was going to kill myself or somebody, that my life was unmanageable, and that it was time to stop.
Mm.
And I had gone through phases before. Um, I had a DWI once. I spent a night in jail once. I had broken relationships. I had other warning signs, other red flags in my history
Right.
that were not the wake up call that I needed. And it wasn't until this one that I was like, okay, that's it. I have to stop, and I need help. And I found a community of support to help me get through that. What do you know? So that was, the recovery of that, of course, it's a long process, and there's a lot of healing that happens, and a lot of, um, reflection and, acceptance of self that people go through in recovery. And I think by going through that, I thought that I had taken care of a lot of the things that were missing or hurt inside of me. And it wasn't until, see, I stopped drinking in 2001, and I stopped sugaring in around 2021. So it would take another 20 years
Right.
of being in that space of trying to fill something that was missing, of not being able to be okay with myself,
Mm.
of trying to find something else to make me feel good, and healthier ways. I mean, I think that one important thing to share is that, yeah, I went from alcohol to work, which seems healthier than alcohol, and from work to sugar and exercise, which is definitely, these are healthier than drinking. At the
Right.
same time, it was still the same cycle, the same pattern, the same, drivers and
Mm.
needs that were fueling those addictions.
Yeah. And this relates obviously to your book, which is titled Cycling Through Life. And I'm assuming that's not meant to just be literal with your cycling adventures, but also your cycling of addiction that followed through. That, going from the alcohol in your early days to the work, to then the sugar and exercise. Um, can you tell us a little bit about how you've put all this into your book? Again, it's called Cycling Through Life. Tell us a little bit about what's in the book and how all of these stories you've been sharing are related to that.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. It started with, my cycling adventures, and really the driving force, but behind why I'm doing it now, was after I did PBP. People were like, "You should write a book about all these things that you've done," and I've heard that at different times too. And when I started writing the story of PBP, it was like, well, it's so much more than just the cycling stories. It's my whole life. Like, how could I do PBP? How could I do all the things that I needed to do to even qualify for PBP? Well, it's like I have to tell the backstory of how I got to have the resilience and the determination and the perseverance and the things, and it came from the very beginning. So that's how the book
Hmm.
evolved into Cycling Through Life, and being it's a teaching memoir, and it is, going back to, starts in my childhood, when, guess what, we used sugar to feel good. We were given sugar for everything, like at the birthday parties. Oh, you feel bad? Here, have some sugar. Oh, you fell off your bike and busted your lip. Let's go get ice cream. Oh, mom and dad left you at grandma's. Well, let's have sundaes. Like, sugar was a huge part of my emotional regulation and support growing up. And I think that is for a lot of people. It's
Hmm.
not uncommon. I think that with people with addiction, oftentimes, and in the sugar recovery community that I'm in, we have a lot of overlap with people who've gone from sugar as even babies. People had like Karo syrup or Dr. Pepper or Mountain Dew in their baby bottles. These are the stories that I hear. This really happens. So we're
Yeah.
raised on it. It's in our system, and then we may turn to harder drugs if we need something more, like those maybe
Hmm.
third of us people who are really addicted to sugar kind of are. And we've gone through our cycles of alcohol, and we've gone through our cycles of other addictions. There's people with sex addiction, with shopping, with video games, with you
Hmm.
fill in the blank, with gambling, with any of these things. Like in this recovery community that I'm in now, it's we've all gone through these cycles. um, and it seemed, as I, in my recovery, as I see these patterns and I see that I'm not alone, it became important to me to then share my story, to get it out so that other people know that they're also not alone and not broken. Because in the sugar recovery, there's this whole community of people that are like, I've tried my whole life to diet this away and I can't do it. I can't stop. Like the complete frustration with I'm successful in other areas of my life and I can't stop eating the sugar, and sometimes eating the food. Like there's food addiction and sugar addiction and other things that are coupled with that. And it's
Hmm.
really easy to feel like there's got to be something wrong with me. And for me, and finding that, well, it's actually not my fault that I can't stop eating the sugar, and there's a lot going on underneath, and there's a lot of science that supports the brain response,
Hmm.
the hijacking of the brain neurotransmitters, how our dopamine set level kind of gets raised with a tolerance like it does with alcohol. Like there's so much science that supports it, that was like, I need to help people understand that um that these things that make us as great and awesome as we are, especially people that are, go-getters, go all out, that they can also become, harmful to us, and that there's a reason and that there's a way through it. And the thing that by the time I get around to the sugar addiction part of my life, it's like there's nothing else that I can use to kind of numb out. Because the other thing was, sorry, I'm backing up on this, but when I got to the
That's okay.
sugar addiction part, I actually had to change the way I fueled for the ultra stuff because I didn't want to be using sugar. Like part of how I fueled for ultra was I'll eat as much sugar as I can. Yes, I love goos. I love gels. I love stinger waffles. I love all the things. All the things that people are like, oh, I can't eat another one of those. I was like, I will race to have a, fill in the blank hammer gel. The apple cinnamon hammer gel is like apple pie filling to me. Like I loved it. And then when I race, I want a whole cheesecake and a dozen cupcakes, please. Pure frosting, yes. Like that's how I was. So when I went off sugar, then I had to change my whole body's energy management system. Then I had to ask myself, do I even still really enjoy exercising and ultra stuff, or was I just doing it so that I could have the sugar? Like,
Right.
there's kind of a whole discovery process in there. And
Yeah.
in the end, trying to figure out also with the ultra stuff, am I just using it to not be alone with myself? Because by having all these events, by always lining up the next event, the next thing, the whole process of the qualification for Paris-Brest-Paris, and you have to do all these brevets and have to travel all these
Hmm.
places. Like by always having myself occupied with all that stuff, I never had to just be alone with my thoughts, and because I always had something else to focus on. So I was like, okay, if I strip all this stuff away, then what am I left with? And that actually is a kind of scary place to go. Like, does do I really enjoy this ultra stuff, or am I doing it to escape?
Hmm.
And even, if I spend 7 or 8 hours on the bike, then I don't have to deal with people. Like, is that what I'm doing? There's a lot that, that kind of got.
And what was your answer for that?
I think so. I think so. I think that it was an escapism. And now I'm really, really working on um, a more moderate and balanced lifestyle where I don't always have to have the next thing. That's the end of the book is about like after PvP, people were always like, okay, what's next? You know, because I just kept like
Yes.
the next bar. And when I finished PvP and I was like, that didn't do it for me anymore. Like it wasn't the thing. It wasn't the fireworks in my heart. It wasn't like, okay, now you did that. Now what's next? Like I
Mm.
didn't have that feeling. And that
Yeah.
was the time for those. Like I was like, okay, it's time for me to really step back and figure out what is important. Where do I want to put my focus and my energy? And maybe my what's next isn't a race or something bigger, or now I want to do RAM or something like that. Like that might be the
Yeah.
logical thing. Um,
Yeah.
but maybe my what's next is something like having a balanced life and going on vacation. Oh, actually, what's next was I went on vacation and it wasn't a race.
Yeah.
So like things like that are started to come into my vision, and also the knowing that I don't need to be out there always. I don't have to have the next medal or the next accomplishment or the next big thing to be loved and lovable, and to know that the love that I need is within. So the kind of underscoring the whole sugar addiction and recovery is at the bottom of it when we can't stop. What could be missing is self-love. If we don't love ourselves enough to take care of ourselves, then that's something we really got to look at.
Mm.
And that's where the breakthrough happens and the magic can happen.
And you're also working as a coach now to try and help people with this as well, right? Tell
Yes.
me how does that fit into all of this that you're doing?
Well, it's and it's really amazing. I've been in a program for 3 years. That is what introduced me to the science of sugar addiction. Mike Collins is the founder of the program. It used to be called just sugardetox.com. It's been evolving over time. I'm less engaged with that community, and I do the coaching on my own under Ultra Health House. Um, and I'm grateful to that community for the resources, and also am still connected to that community through meetings. So I actually host recovery meetings on um, one night a week for people that are recovering from sugar addiction. And I've been hosting meetings for 2.5 years. And again, it's the community of support, the knowing you're not alone, the being able to share where you are. If it's a bad day and you're craving sugar, it's to help you not use. Or if it's just a day that you're having a bad day and you just need somebody to listen. Like
Mm.
these meetings are for that emotional regulation and support through connection with a community of people who love and support you. And that's
Yeah.
been life changing, really. And so I have those meetings, and then I have my one-on-one coaching where I help people. And in the recovery process, it starts with food, but that's just the beginning. And
Hmm.
in getting off the sugar, there's a specific detox formula to help you. And I think by coaching people through that, getting through stringing together some days of abstinence from sugar, starting to let the brain neurotransmitters recalibrate.
Hmm.
There's so much value in that. And then coaching through, okay, now that we're clear of sugar, now what do we do? What do we do with ourselves? What do we do with our emotions? How do we find healthier ways to regulate without turning to food or sugar? That's what I do in my coaching. And the
Wow.
results that I've seen are people's lives change. Like my life changed. I was doing a job. Like I finally, since I was in Hawaii and I wasn't a successful health coach for as long as I was, I actually went back and got an engineering job here because I was
Oh yeah.
like, I've just kind of gave up on the dream. And after I got clear of sugar, I was like, no, I'm not giving up on my dream. My dream is
Mm.
to help people and be of service, and not to just be an engineer and have a job. I
Yeah.
want to really pursue this, and I'm passionate about it. And this was important enough, like this was life changing enough and different enough that I was like, this message has to get out there into the world, that we're
Mm.
not alone, that there's nothing wrong or broken. But if you can't eat, there's so many people that can't stop eating sugar. Like it's really,
Yeah.
really a huge, huge problem. And people joke about it all the time. Oh yeah, I'm a sugar addict. And some people joke about it and they aren't. And some people
Right.
joke about it and they are. Not everybody is
Mm.
a sugar addict by any means,
No.
just like not everybody is an alcoholic. And I
Mm.
acknowledge that and recognize that and appreciate that. But for the people that are really, really desperate and don't know what to do and don't know how to get over it and are willing to try something, like when you're at that point that you're willing to really do something different because you're so desperate, that's where I was, and that's who I try to help.
And I guess for you, as I mentioned off the top, you've now, like, as they say, bought the farm. You're you're taking that one step further, and you're producing your own stuff. What's on the farm that you bought?
Oh, Larry, it is true. I live on a farm. I personally choose not to eat fruit. Fruit to me is a trigger. Anything sweet for
Too much
me is a
sugar?
trigger. Yeah. Well, it's that if I here's the thing. So what's on my farm is oranges, tangelos, lemons, limes, mangoes, papayas, coconuts, very exotic tropical fruits like mamey, which I had never even heard of before. What else is in the, oh, sugar apple. Like when I go to farmers markets and I tell some of our favorite vendors what I've got, they're like, oh my gosh, that's my favorite fruit ever. Like black sapote fruit, which is chocolate. It's supposed to be like chocolate pudding fruit, like all these things. So my farm is very dangerous for me because I'm like, I won't eat one orange, I'll eat three oranges. I won't eat one mamey, I'll eat, I just have a, if I have sweet, it triggers cravings for me.
Right.
And it's just easier for me to stay on track if I don't. So I'm really committed to food sustainability in Hawaii. And so part of my vision for what I'm doing at the farm is to be able to provide, plenty of oranges for, kids in school, to get into the community CSA, community supported agriculture boxes, that people who want to support local farmers can buy local fresh produce that's, made
Mm.
pesticide free and that kind of thing, or donated. I mean, it's not about the profitability. It's more about this amazing land that I have and what it has to
Mhm.
offer to the community and sharing that. In fact, like this weekend, we have a new place that's making ice cream, which I don't eat ice cream. But they're doing their kickoff at the Keauhou Farmers Market in town, and we're bringing a box of our oranges and lemons and limes for them to use, and mangoes and papayas. We got a lot of papayas for them to use in their um, as they launch their business. And that's where it's a donation. It's like, please, you see what you can do with these. It's part of
Right.
supporting another business that is also committed to like healthy foods in Hawaii and that kind of thing. So
Mm.
yeah.
Just another community you're involved in.
Yeah. I do aspire to have chickens and eggs, but there's a whole lot of work that has to be done on the property first. There's a lot of cleanup. So it was an orchard, but it hasn't been worked in over 3 years. So the whole
Okay.
irrigation system is offline right now. The trees were all overgrown with vines, and like all the fruit trees were overgrown with vines and invasive like species of trees and plants. And so
Mm.
it's a pretty big
It's going to
process
be a
of
couple of years to
restoring and
get it to where you want.
revitalizing.
Yeah.
But that said, the
Yeah.
trees are going off. They're still happy. And I love to go talk to them. So I talk to the trees, and especially like the special ones that are the mameys were just like such a special gift. So I've given that one some extra love. And moringa. Moringa is actually a superfood that I do use. It has a lot of beneficial antioxidants and micronutrients, and that's a tree. And people may have heard of moringa powder, moringa leaves. There's teas, and people often add it to their smoothies. But I will
Yeah.
take the leaves and add them to my eggs in the morning. So
Soon to be farm fresh eggs.
yeah.
Well, this has been great talking to you. What about the book now? Do we know, tell us who's publishing it, when it's going to be coming out, that kind of thing. And I'll make sure to put some links in the show notes and stuff.
Okay, thank you. I have a website, ingridhillhouse.com, that'll be tracking the book's progress. And I have it with Hasmark Publishing for targeting release for the end of this year. I'm also going down another path with Hay House Publishing that I'm very excited about, and working that parallel path there. But with Hasmark, I see that coming out by the end of the year, and we'll be excited to keep everybody up to date through the website or, different social media channels. My Instagram, Ingrid Hillhouse Health, is also another good place to keep tabs on how that's going. But I'm super excited. Yeah, Cycling Through Life. The subtitle is Your Roadmap for Going All Out, Shifting Gears, and How to Not Get Run Over. So that's excellent. Yeah.
Was that written by you?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so I'll make sure I put your links to your website, your Instagram, and all that stuff in the show notes so people can check that out. Thank you for coming and having this discussion about all the cycles that have gone through your life and adding to the bucket list of adventures out there for people to take a look at. It's been great catching up with you again, and thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Larry. It's been awesome. I appreciate it. Awesome questions, and thanks for the opportunity.
Hey, if you liked what you heard today, please tell a friend and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you'd rate and review the show while you're there. Drop the names of the people you think we should interview, and we'll get in touch with them and make that happen. Thank you for listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, a production of 55 Enterprises.